to Complexity Made Simple. My name is Paul Allen, and before we get into today's video, just a reminder, some great news. The design of experiments for 21st century engineers, the Minitab version, has just been released. I know for those of you unfortunate enough to have selected Minitab, you have a great deal of difficulty in understanding this software. So we've created this special version of this text with the Minitab screenshots. The link to lulu.com where you can buy this book is in the description below. And of course, you also have the option of purchasing Drink Tea and Read the Paper, which is the perfect book to go with your green belt or Six Sigma black belt training. The link to lulu.com for that book is also in the description below. And of course, the other thing that we'd really love you to do, please go to buymeacoffee.com and make a small donation. All of these things, the purchase of the books and the donations, they help keep the channel moving. I'm really grateful to all of those people who are currently donating. Many thanks for your support and your help. And now let's get on with today's video. Welcome to the latest video. And in this video newsletter, what we're going to take a look at is how to overcome the minimum order quantity when you're trying to create a lean situation. But everybody says, I can't order in small quantities, there's a minimum order quantity, or indeed the purchasing department want to drive some huge order to get some price differential. So we are going to look at lean, the minimum order quantity, and how to overcome this. Okay, so the MOQ and lean implementation. Now, the minimum order quantity is always one of the classic pushbacks when you start to talk about the way you're organizing your factory. Lean, remember, lean equals flow, and flow equals customer service. Stock is not what services your customer. It's all about the speed of the flow. So essentially, it's very simple. Your customer, on average, and this is very important, it must be the average. The average is the only number you can predict. No forecast can predict the random number around the average. That is a random number. Demand is an average. So if your customer takes on average 1,200 pieces of some particular product per month, okay, so that's the demand. Obviously that's the output. What your purchasing should be doing is ordering 1,200 a month. Okay, so, and it's the flow. We are ordering exactly what the demand is asking for. The flow of the product is at the speed that the customer is consuming the item, and therefore it is the flow that services the customer. All that stock does is it's the shock absorber between the fact that the customer doesn't order exactly 1,200 pieces. So of course sometimes they take a little bit more, sometimes they take a little bit less, and your stock is doing this. It's the shock absorber, but it isn't what services the customer. If these two don't match one another really well, you'll either stock out or you'll overstock. Your factory will be full of stock. Do you have off-site warehousing by any chance? That's a sign that you don't have flow. Okay. Now, of course, What do the purchasing people say? Well, the purchasing people say, yeah, I can't order 1,200 a month. There is a minimum order quantity. Let's say there's a minimum order quantity which is 10 times bigger than that. Okay, so it's what would that be? 12,000 instead of 1,200. We've got to buy 12,000. That's the minimum order quantity in order to get the price break. Okay, here's what you do. You give the supplier a 1 year purchase order that looks like this. Every month it says 1,200. Okay, so you tell them Jan, Feb, March, April, etc. all the way to December. So you're actually going to order 14,400. You're going to order a year's worth, but you give them the order spread across the year. Now that's the minimum order quantity. Now don't forget, whatever it is you're making, and this won't be a random item, whatever it is you're making, I don't know, let's say you're making staplers. Making staplers is not an accident. If you want to buy this rubber base here from a molding company, it's no accident that you need this rubber base. Don't treat orders as if it's a surprise and just order for the next 4 weeks or the next 5 weeks. So here's what you do. You place one order. Don't forget, look how efficient your purchasing system becomes. Instead of placing orders every month, unique orders, and they've got to match off, and they never match off. So your account payables are flipping disaster as well. What you do is you give them this big yearly order. And then what you tell them to do is to deliver that in 12 buckets. Deliver 1,200 every month. Now it could be that the genuine demand here is only, let's say, 1150. All right, 1150. So what might happen is stock might build up over a short period. Now if you want to deal with that, just take one order out of the system. You're still matching this. But what you're doing is to say, it's okay, we don't need the delivery this month. And then that trims the stock, brings it back down, and then you can carry on with the 1,200 a month. And of course, if ultimately you want to say, well, we've got a signal that says the real demand is now 1150, because you could pass that on to your customer. You could trim this, but you still wouldn't be violating the minimum order quantity. You've raised one order, you're just getting the stuff in, everything matches because the quantities are always the same. Everything matches up. You've always got enough stock because your average supply meets your average demand. You've created flow and you've created a minimum order quantity, and you've got hardly any stock in your company because every time it arrives, you turn it into goods and you deliver it to the customer. Flow is what services the customer. Stock doesn't. But what you have to do is think beyond the monthly ordering system. You create one big order, and then the purchase order is always the same. It always matches. There's no mistakes. Quantities are always sitting there. It's always going to match off, and therefore you don't get any invoice queries. Your accounts payable department has only got 2 people and a cat in there because you don't need masses of people to deal with all the queries. And that is how you create flow, how you still keep your minimum order quantity, but you service the customer with the minimum amount of stock, but the greatest amount of on-time delivery. Now, of course, this idea of putting one yearly order on there also applies to works orders. So it's the same thing. Why don't you put one yearly works order on there? You know you're going to make however many of these. It's not an accident. You're selling these. It's what you're in business to do, to repetitively sell this item. So instead of planning with a works order every month, just put one big fat works order on there, and then just use a pull system to say, we need you to make another 1,000, we need you to make another 1,000, we need you to make another 1,000. If you do that, planning is lean, purchasing is lean, accounts is lean. Or you could carry on what you're doing and having loads of people wastefully checking millions of flipping transactions off every year. That is how to be lean with the minimum order quantity.